Ms. Olsson, co-founder and chief experience officer at Kareem. Abdulrahman, Tony Bates, CEO, Social Capital Growth. Abdulrahman Tarabzouni, CEO and Managing Director at STV. And will.i.am, musician and creative innovator. And our highly capable moderator for the session is Fadi Ghandour, Executive Chairman at Wamda Group.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have a fantastic superstar panel talking about extremely relevant and important issues that affect the core of the story that we've been hearing today: governance, data, data security, artificial intelligence, change, youth, entrepreneurship, industries and economies beyond the dependence on oil at the core of Vision 2030. So everything that we're living in here today and in the 21st century, and the change that's happening globally and specifically in our region, we're not immune to the digital revolution or the digital disruption. Name it what you want. We have a panel that is at the core of this issue. Each in his own capacity and capability are influencing this, either in the kingdom here or in the region or in Silicon Valley or across the world, as Mr. will.i.am is doing. So I was just sitting with Will, and he's in his capacity as an entrepreneur here, and his persona as an influencer across the world. So we're honored to have you here with us. This is your first visit to Saudi Arabia, so welcome on behalf of the kingdom and the region. Good to have you here. So we're not going to talk about your celebrity status, but I want to. You've moved into investing in artificial intelligence, IoT. You are at the panel of the World Economic Forum for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And as I was talking to you a minute ago at lunch, you gave me a statement that I thought is important that we start with it. You said, "I don't think people know what's about to happen in the next 10 years." You're launching a product of AI. Tell us, what does that mean? What is it? What is it that we don't know that's going to happen to us in 10 years?
Well, with governance being like the umbrella to the statement, if we knew what was coming in the next 10 years, then education, HI, will be the most important thing that every government around the world is focused on. Because the investment for AI is far greater than the investment for human intelligence. So we're racing really fast to make the machine smarter and smarter and smarter, while we are so addicted to holding the machine up for memories. When all the stuff that we're doing are making the four monarchies, the kingdoms, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Amazons and the Apples, smarter and smarter and smarter and more powerful. Now, if, right along, that in that umbrella of governance is finance. So if I were to say, who's more powerful, Facebook or Barclays? Facebook or BBVA? Facebook or Barclays and BBVA put together? Facebook is more powerful, has more money. And how could something that you don't pay for have more money and more powerful than something that holds everyone's money and invests it? So what's coming 10 years from now makes whatever we're living in right now look so miniature, because the machine will be that smart, and data is something that you're going to have conversations with. Like, I'm going to talk to my device, whether my device is in my pocket, in my ears, or my house itself, or my vehicle. And at that point in time, I hope the data is ours, right? I hope that the data is empowering me and my community and all other data doppelgangers that resemble my data behavior, right? So 10 years from now, Is AI part of governance? Is the machine that wise that it could predict what's coming? Like it could predict the weather right now. If you say, Siri, is it going to rain in China next week? It's going to give you a whole forecast. Right? That's because of so much data on the oceans and the rainforests and winds can get that precise to where it's going to rain to the minute. Now, how about behavior and people and shopping? Right? When the machine knows all transactions happening at one particular time, or traffic coupled with transactions, we have no clue on what's coming in the next 10 years. And it's amazing. I'm an optimist, and I think it's going to be an amazing shift, and it will force humanity to be more human to each other.
And so, how would you respond to this? Will, I know you're passionate about philanthropy and about education and knowledge inclusion for people, specifically in the US, that are on the margins, that have been excluded. I mean, how do you match that? I mean, it's us, even us that are way out there in knowledge and in being in society and participating in it, and we still feel alienated. So what happens to the people that are already alienated from things that are not even AI enabled? What happens? Who do we leave behind here? How many people are we leaving behind? What happens to government and governance in such situations?
So I'm American, and but I'm a citizen of the planet first, second American, and we're leaving a lot of people behind, actually. And if we weren't, then me having a school in the ghetto that I come from would be like, why would you need to do that? Like, why would someone need to have an after-school program if governance was done to the point where everyone was educated with the tools that'll help them change tomorrow? Like, we know that technology rules our world, but in every single elementary, junior high school, and high school, every kid has access to baseball, football, and basketball. And those kids, only the men are going to play baseball, basketball, and football. My sister or my niece is not going to play for, Manchester United or the Raiders, right? That's fact. But every single one of those kids has a phone in their pocket, and in their school, they're not learning iOS. In their school, they're not learning Linux and Unix that iOS is built on. In school, they're not learning DOS. They're not learning, how to fork Android. They're not learning these things. So that's what I do in the ghetto that I come from. I go to my school, I go to my neighborhood, and I teach our kids computer science, robotics, mathematics. And I started 10 years ago with 65 kids, and now that's grown to the tune of 700 plus kids. I started at 12 years old. Now I go as young as 9 to 18. 100% of our kids graduate and go to school, 90% of which are going to school for robotics, computer science, and engineering. And the reason why I have an entrepreneurial, thing with I Am Plus, where we're building AI, is to prove to our kids that this is the path that we should go to. If I tell them, like, hey, you should take a STEM course, and then they see me on stage, they're like, well, you're lying. I want to do music like you. I'm like, no, you don't want to do music. Trust me. You want to do tech. You want to be doing computer science. Here are the tools to design tomorrow. It may look like it's 2018, but really it's 1918, and the Industrial Revolution is popping off, and the investors are Westinghouse and JP Morgan. And Thomas Edison and Tesla are building the world. They're lighting up cities and bringing electricity to our homes. Ford is building cars. The Wright brothers are flying airplanes in 1918. Here we are, 2018, and things are happening that will transform the world by 2030. When you say 2030, how far are you thinking what it's going to be like 2030? because it doesn't look anything like 2018. How we talk, right now in 2018, people don't even talk to each other at dinner. Everyone's on their phones. No one's engaging. They think they are. They think they're multitasking, but not like the Wright brothers. Not when they were building airplanes. So what's coming right now, and the folks that are focusing on transforming the world, they know how to really, truly stay focused. They know how to make use of their phones, not like the masses. The masses are just glued to these platforms, making the platforms powerful with this thing called data. So 2030, the world is freaking different. But guess what? The kids in my neighborhood are prepared for that. And if government were doing that, that would be the dumbest thing for a person from the ghetto to say. It's pretty much, for you guys in the audience, you're probably like, will.i.am, you're from the Black Eyed Peas. What are you talking about AI for? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But in actuality, our platform is powering Deutsche Telekom's customer service right now as we speak in Austria, augmenting their call centers. Now, that's not dumb, right? And a lot of times when I said I was going to dive into this, they said I was using my money wrong. Well, you're dumb for wasting your money on that. You can't really compete. But if you think about all the crazy ideas, it's the crazy ideas that actually turn into big businesses. Uber and Kareem, those are crazy ideas. I'm going to allow a person with a car to take somebody that wants to go somewhere, and there's no security to protect the driver and the passenger. And no one's exchanging with cash if you're in America. If you were to tell that to black cabs in London or New York cab companies, they would say that's a crazy idea. Airbnb is a crazy idea. Hey, I got an extra room, you want to stay in it? I don't know you. That's a crazy idea. But it's a big business right now. It's the crazy ideas. So in governance, vision is important. Because if you don't have vision in governance, you're just governing the way you governed yesterday. You need to have that leapfrog vision on where we are going as a civilization, as a society, how equality is, being exercised in the most humane way, education being first. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Bedar, for having me and inviting me here. And everyone that contributed, had so much knowledge in hearing everyone speak. And I just wanted to speak on a couple of things that, vision, passion. You have to really motivate the youth to help design a better tomorrow, because they're the ones that are going to be leading it, and they're the ones that are on these phones supplying air and fuel for these mega giant, kingdoms called tech companies.
Thanks, Will. So I'm going to go to Tony, even though I wanted to take it to Abdulrahman so that he plugs in the Saudi view of it. So keep that in mind, Abdulrahman. Wait for me for a second. Tony might need to leave early. But Tony, this is, what Will said is at the core of what you guys do at Social Capital. You're one of the premier venture capital funds in the US. You are in the business of solving, as it says on your website, big problems. You think capitalism is relatively broken. You think governance and government is broken also, and you are in the business of financing, investing, enabling people that are going to fix these big problems through technology. At the core of what Will was saying. So take us to where it is. I want to remind people here that you're the quintessential techie in many ways. You worked at Microsoft as the senior vice president. You ran Skype. If you didn't know, he ran Skype. He sold Skype also. And he took a company public, GoPro, if you know GoPro, took it public and ran it for a while. So now you're an investor, you're an enabler, you are a change maker. Tell us what's happening in Silicon Valley at the core of data security, data breaches, and how it affects governance and that affects us.
Absolutely, and again, thank you, Bada, for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be here in Saudi Arabia and just to sort of feel the things that are on people's mind and try to understand from my perspective what you hope to achieve with Vision. It's really exciting, but I do want to kind of come back a little bit to what Will said and explain a little bit of my view from Silicon Valley. So as Fadi mentioned, I've been very fortunate to really see the first two big waves, if you think of technology transformation, which is really the internet wave. I worked at Cisco actually for many years and built the roads, built the plumbing that enabled all of this. And I remember how we were able to recruit the best talent because folks wanted to work on things that really changed the world. They wanted to change the way people accessed information. And then the second wave I was fortunate enough to be around was the mobile wave, as we talked about, which really put in everyone's hands access to that information in a very useful, seamless, and in many ways quite natural and enjoyable way. And now it's been taken to a whole new level with AI, where we're now using more natural ways of doing it, voice as an example. But what's important to understand with these waves is that with each of the folks that have really built these great companies, and we look for this each and every day when we think about investing, is they're all mission-based. They all have a vision and they stick to it. And increasingly, they use data to first understand what it is that's important about their business and how they can really accelerate that. And that's important to understand because that is the way that the newer investors in Silicon Valley are thinking. Now, our mission, as Fadi described, is very simple and very clean, but very hard to pull off. We want to advance humanity by solving the world's hardest problems, and we want to find companies and entrepreneurs who want to take on those challenges and do that at scale. And the way we think about doing that is essentially emulating what we think will be the future of great companies in the way that we invest. We believe that data is the ground truth and is the thing that will bring you to the promised land of what the next great companies are. If you look, as Will described, all the most powerful companies, at the root of what they do is not just that they're technologists and technology and engineering companies, is that they understand the power of data and they optimize their business models to exploit that data. And we are, all of us as consumers, whether it's business or in traditional consumer sense, giving that data to them. But what they're doing with it is they're learning, iterating, training over and over again. And that is actually how we invest. And we think that is the future. And we think, frankly, the old industrial complex of where you knew someone and you saw some pattern in a human being, whether you liked the way they smiled or you liked the way they presented, is fundamentally over. We're moving to a world of not who you know, but what you know. And increasingly, the way you're going to learn is by understanding the signals of your business, the data, and applying AI and machine learning techniques to basically have an edge and to learn how to do this at scale. And that is fundamentally what we do as investors at Social Capital. Now, just to address a couple of other points that have been made. So, if data is the key to the next great companies and the folks that are really going to transform on a global scale, how do you make sure that you secure that data? We have a debate happening right now in the US about whether Facebook, as an example, has too much data, hasn't taken care of it, and should it be regulated? I think it is a matter of time where we'll see some of that regulations. But my sense of that is that at the end of the day, the services that are being provided for free, yes, you're giving away a lot of the information, will continue to outweigh the concerns that people have about their privacy. One thing we do see that's really important to understand, though, is this is not lost on investors. One of the most important areas that we focus on is cybersecurity. And it isn't just because people are being hacked and losing their data every time, because it is one of the most important aspects that has to be navigated as we move through these transformations. If we are to realize the vision that we'll put out there in 10 years, folks are going to have to focus on this. and innovate just like they innovate on all these other services. Here's the good news, though. Just as many incredible computer scientists, incredible engineers and designers are focused on solving those problems as they are on creating great services like Kareem. So I am extremely optimistic, but I do think that you have to have a vision. The governance has to fit the model of where things are going. It can't look backwards. When we see companies stall, they basically get into that trap. When we see companies thrive and grow, they realize there's going to be challenges along the way, but they're focused on looking forward to where things can go. Now, I'll put it to you that we've seen the movement, the wave of the internet evolution to the mobile, to the AI evolution, but we're still at the very beginning. There's new modalities of the way that we will interact as consumers into services, whether it's speech, other forms of natural user interfaces, VR. And you just have to embrace that, get ahead of it, allow a governance model that allows the great entrepreneurs to thrive in that and not hold them back. Because the winners in the futures are going to be the ones who do that. We see this every day in Silicon Valley because we have a very unique view into the world, and we try to accelerate that. But I'm very passionate. There's talent all over the world. We have a program within our own investment arm where you can submit your data to us anywhere globally. If we like what the data says to us, we will invest in you. We don't have to meet you in person. We just need to understand that you understand the power of data, and as you build out your companies, you're willing to use that data in the right ways to really enhance your product. So very bullish about it. It will have to be navigated carefully along the way, but I think if folks embrace that, take some of the models that are built from some of the great companies from the Silicon Valley area, we have a tremendous chance to realize the vision that Will just talked about.
I'm going to follow on a bit here and take Facebook as a story that is at the core of what's happening today. So we voluntarily share all the information, well, most of the information that we have on ourselves, on Facebook, on Twitter, etc. This information is trusted to a platform that we didn't know that was going to do what it did to our data. So how do we, is this, and then taking you back to this story of the vision of Silicon Valley, is Silicon Valley presumptuous about its thinking, and I'm going to be challenging here, that it knows the problems of the world while it really doesn't? Yeah. And do they need to be humbled a little bit and be more in touch with reality because they affect us globally? And it does affect us. You know, what happened at Facebook is not an American story. It's a global story. I mean, how you will end up with a protectionist world. So your vision of openness in Silicon Valley will end up us building walls and saying, get out of here. We don't want to be part of that process because we can't influence it. So maybe you can talk to that, Tony. Yeah,
I think we have to be careful about, it's very easy narrative to broad brush Silicon Valley. I myself do it sometimes. And when I think about the openness, it's about the way the ecosystem evolves. It's the way how we share, how we build on top of each other, how we share. It's not a zero-sum game. We're not all trying to just beat each other up, right? Individual companies do have to realize that as they grow, they move often from sort of acting locally and they have to think globally. And this is going to be something that every company of any scale has to go through. Now, the challenge, not to defend a Facebook or anyone else, is, you know, the pace of change and innovation and adoption is very fast. And so you get lightning in a bottle, you create a new service, and it goes like that. Now, what makes that so amazing is that we can have a tremendous impact on the world. But candidly, to put all of those things in place ahead of time would end up slowing innovation. You know, I grew up in the UK, and I was part of a movement where we thought we'd have our own internet, and we created all our own standards, okay? And we all got together in the European Union, and we created all these standards. Meanwhile, in the US, what they basically did is created a bunch of code, put it out there, people put applications on it with no governance at the time, and the rest is history. So this is going to be an ongoing balance that's going to continue sort of innovation to some degree versus governance. To your point, though, Fadi, they have a very big role to play. I do think it's important that people are humble. I don't want to talk about any individual company, but hubris can kill companies. Like I was at Microsoft. I was there post the DOJ in sort of placing the dissent decree. And what happens when that happens is innovation slows down. Fundamentally, when I was at Microsoft, the company in some ways was run by lawyers because they didn't want to get another fine in the EU. So I would say that these are important lessons that Silicon Valley and tech companies need to learn and understand. Because ultimately, by not being a little bit more forward-thinking, it will slow them down at some point. And so when I sit on boards, and I'm on a bunch of public boards, I believe this is a very important problem and something that needs to be taken seriously. And I think there is a wave of folks in venture, in investing, that realize that this is an important agenda item and we need to talk about it on a global basis. You know, we've moved from a world of sort of build it and they'll come and we'll figure out the business model to a totally different world where that no longer is acceptable to say, you know, well, I didn't know, or I'm a mistake, it was a mistake, or I was too young and I was too junior. So we will see that shift. And I think it's a necessary and important shift, but it has to be balanced. If we steer back too far the other way, the innovation will slow down. Another place will do it. They'll make the same mistakes anyway. So I'm not really giving you a concrete answer. It's
right.
Nuanced,
no, fair,
but it's important.
Fair enough. It gets me to ask Abdulrahman the question because, well, we're here in the kingdom. We're at this is the place where the region is being pulled towards 2030. So this is a pivotal country, the pivotal country, if you want, in my view, that affects the rest of the neighborhood in a big way. You are the quintessential person that the future is betting on. So what you're investing, you're a Googler who lived in Silicon Valley, came back to town, brain regain. Where is our ecosystem? We're exactly the opposite of what Silicon Valley is doing. People are catching up to them and they're moving very quickly, and we are way behind in many ways. And we want to go forward. You have $500 million to affect that in Saudi Arabia. So give us your view. Give us a run of the landscape of what is it that we're going to be facing. What are you facing? What are you worried about as we discuss all these issues? And then on top of all of that, we're going to ask you, and then where does governance stand? Because maybe it should wait for a bit. I don't know.
Maybe I can start with Fadi. Let me take a stab, I guess. Many questions there, but based on what my colleagues said, will.i.am and Tony, I guess one thing I picked up is this whole notion of innovation and disruption and all these sectors that we're talking about start off as really crazy ideas. And there was, one of the funds in the US, literally one of their investment theses was, we invest in stuff that, rot your brain. And their thesis was, look at Twitter when it first started, look at Facebook, look at mobile gaming. A lot of this stuff starts looking like a toy that, any big corporation or investor dismisses, from the first few sentences, but end up becoming valuable engines of value creation and whatnot. But then let me, to bring this to this governance topic, I guess, I spent quite a bit of time at Google, roughly 7+ years between the region and the valley, and I left the region when I was roughly 18, and this is the first time that I'm back, and I settled back, and my family is with me. And the first thing that hits you is, you cannot govern, or it's really hard to govern what you don't understand. And what a lot of these companies were able to do is to realize that very quickly and say, well, I'm going to have some form of anti-governance or self-governance to bring the people who know things much better than I do, who have the right DNA to build stuff, help me cope with disruption, to self-govern and produce and be effective members of my organization. And you see this across the board, right? Whether it's Google's 20% time, Facebook's Skunkworks labs and Amazon's Lab 126 and a lot of the internal programs they have. A lot of these are effectively some form of saying, I want to continue being innovative. I will never have the right DNA at every single point in time to cope with disruptions. I want to carve out this way to allow people to innovate, to have a license to not be governed by my KPIs, my governance models, my authority matrices, because these are so static and fixed, and if I rely on them to run my business and make new plans and whatnot, I'm going to be dead. Concretely, like at some point, Google in 2005, 50% of the products they launched that year, one of them was Gmail, was a result of the 20% time model, right? Where literally you're telling your people, I don't care what you're doing in that 20% time. I'm not even going to measure you. There's no governance for how you're going to spend your time or performance management or whatnot. Just go and do stuff. So that's, I guess, one big thing that hit me when I came back, that between governance and anti-governance, you need to find a balance. And given that this economy and the region, predominantly is government-led, and a lot of your national assets are actually, government-owned, it's somewhat of a challenge to find the right way to make these engines become innovative and allow some form of self-governance and to allow executives to go out and make bets and fail. I mean, failure still is a major issue here. I mean, Silicon Valley guys and a lot of investors keep saying that, failing is great, failing is we celebrate failure and whatnot, and we keep repeating it here in all sorts of forums that we want to encourage a culture of failure, but it's definitely, we're not close. To embracing that, so I guess a lot of building blocks that need to come in place to allow a thriving ecosystem where indigenous plays, people within the region feel the ability and the empowerment to go out and enact change. And if I just speak of the digital sector, I mean the story is phenomenal, right? Because on one hand, you have this region punches above its weight across every single category you can think of. Video, communications, social, mobile, etc. It's a great market for someone who's looking at digital demand. When you look at digital supply, the story is very sour, and probably one of the fact that you do not have a strong local supply that meets this very strong demand is a function of the lack of governance models that allow, countries and state-owned assets and all their derivatives and offshoots to contribute to creating more supply in the system. So I guess, in a nutshell, we're big believers, and by the way, this is exactly what we did with STC, right? Like this whole concept of Saudi Telecom is a great company who, has, become so efficient in being a telco player. And this is universal, by the way. It's called the paradox of efficiency. When you as a corporation essentially become so efficient at running your core business, you manage risk, and you do all these things to be so good at what you're doing, you're actually very prone to disruption. You become, susceptible to new movements and new forces in the market. And what we worked with SEC on is saying, well, if that's the case, if all these forces and disruptive forces that are coming your way require a very different DNA to deal with and defend against, then let's carve out this model where STV, Saudi Technology Ventures, essentially, takes your assets and opens them up to the world, opens them up to the ecosystem for players who have the right DNA to come and access these assets and create value on top of them, and for everyone in that equation to share the upside. So in many ways, it's that model of saying, platformize yourself. If you have assets, and this works at a corporate level, even at a country level. I mean, the countries who are truly moving the needle on global issues in many ways became platforms, right? Where people from all over the world come in, use their assets, share in the upside. So that's a micro model that we've done with SCC, and we're, very bullish on the region, and we believe, there is Kareem. The region can handle many, hopefully more unicorns in other sectors, and we're bullish on making them come out in the next 4 or 5 years.
And you think, are you seeing Saudi techies starting to bud out and disrupt and challenge the incumbents?
Absolutely. I mean, it's we've only been live for roughly 2-3 months now. The amount of talent we see in the market concentrated. I'm not saying that talent is not an issue, but there is an amazing top-down kind of effect happening where this license to go and disrupt and license to go and dream, driven, very strongly all the way from the top, is trickling down, and we see it in Saudi teams and startups we meet. I mean, without going into specific examples, but teams of 2 to 3 guys who bootstrap themselves to a $30 million run rate business, who never raised capital, who want to grow, a number of these, and we one of our theses is we want to create the next digital defaults of the region. Default being the champions within digital sectors we look at, and if you look at the Middle East and North Africa, roughly 30 to 40% of the value is in Saudi Arabia, and if you can create a digital default in Saudi Arabia by cracking Saudi, you have much better odds at taking this default and making it a MENA default. And with time, hopefully, you take that MENA default and make them an emerging markets default. A classic case in point is Kareem. So we're very bullish on getting Saudi entrepreneurs to build hyper-local Saudi plays that serve Saudi demand in a way that is differentiated from global players. Because there are plays that we're not going to get into that are, the word would be, they're unmoatable. You cannot build local moats around. But we want to get into plays where Saudis can definitely build deep moats, can defend against global competition, can take these plays and make them MENA winners and hopefully emerging markets winners.
Awesome. So this takes me to Magnus. You're the man of the hour in many ways. As a co-founder of Kareem, you're the local champion, the local unicorn platform that's really making a big difference and changes in the region. But at the same time, you had, and I don't want to focus on that subject alone, you just announced a massive data breach. So this is at the core of the story. Millions of people's data, you got hacked or something like that. So the story is here. It's not a Silicon Valley story. This is the story that is right on each and everyone's phone here. So I'll let you address that issue. But then I want to talk about how do you manage a super fast exponential growth company of suddenly hundreds of thousands of people on the ground in a region that's not necessarily used to that growth. So take us, you run this story, but start wherever you want and address the issue of that data breach and how do you govern internally very quickly so that the trust of the public remains.
Thank you, Fadi. So first of all, very honored and grateful to be here in Riyadh. Thank you, brother. Amazing panel. Very humbled sitting next to all of you guys. Lot of super exciting topics that has been talked about. Technology is the future, governance, building, how do we do it locally, etc. But let's talk about what we announced this week first. So as many of you probably have seen, this week Kareem announced that we have been the victims of a massive data security incident. It happened back in, we were notified about it back in January, and this week we were finally ready to be able to tell the public about it and everyone about it. Now, the interesting thing here, and this also links to governance, right, is that in the majority of the markets where we operate, we are today in about 100 cities across the region, from Morocco to Pakistan, 15 countries. In the majority of these markets, there is no regulatory requirements around public disclosure when these things happen. But from the day that we were notified about the situation, it was clear for us that in line with our values of transparency, of course we have to inform everyone about what happened, regardless of whether this is a requirement or not. Now, why did we wait until a few days ago to do this, which is around 3 months? So the majority of reasons are our priority throughout this incident has been to make sure that our captains and our customers are safe. And going public with this announcement before we understood fully what had happened. We have been collaborating with multiple law enforcement agencies globally. And we have also had some of the world's best cybersecurity companies working alongside us to really, first of all, understand exactly what happened, but also to make sure that we put in even stronger fences and protection to our systems, so that once we tell the world about this, and we, unfortunately will have more people coming to knock on our doors, we will be in a much, much stronger place. And this we were basically ready to do as of this week. And as if you guys are Kareem customers, you should have been notified individually. And we have also spoken to, of course, regulators, partners, corporate customers, governments, etc. So I think this has been a period of big learning. And we, of course, are, on behalf of everyone at Kareem, we're sorry for what happened. But we have come out a lot stronger as a result. And we feel that, this is a global phenomena for everyone these days, the threat of cyber criminals. And, it's a continuous basically war that you have to keep fighting. And,
Magnus, a question here. So you're touching new things that I don't know the regulator understand. So you are basically self-regulating and announcing whatever you're announcing, but there is no regulation in the region that tells you what you need to do when you're breached. I mean, this is governance also. I mean, is the government aware that suddenly they need to start addressing these issues because they're home? It's not a Silicon Valley story anymore?
So I think the conversation is happening within the most governments in the region. But as you said, Fadi, we feel very strongly that as a leading tech company from the region, we have to show the way. And this doesn't come only in the area of cybersecurity, but also in other dimensions when it comes to governance. So for example, in many of our jurisdictions, the industry of ride-hailing is still new, and governments are working on the appropriate regulations. We're operating in many markets where physical security and safety is a big topic. And for example, we have taken upon ourselves from day one to do very extensive background checks, for example. So when we onboard a captain, we go through very thorough processes. This is nothing that is told to us by rules or regulations, but something that we feel that we have to, as a responsible citizen of our communities, we have to do. So I think, and maybe linking back to the topic of technology and governance, in industries that are moving very fast, where, in some cases we're seeing that even in the leading edge places like Silicon Valley, they haven't figured out all the details, let alone in the rest of the world. It becomes the duty of the companies themselves to lead the way here. And I think that is something that we feel both responsible for and very passionate about driving.
Can I just add one
Yes.
thing maybe? You know, when I was running Skype, we experienced a 36-hour outage at a very difficult time right before the holiday season. And I just want to say that I think one of the things that we continue to learn, as you mentioned, is in this case it wasn't a security breach, but we didn't know. And so it took a long time to figure this out. And you want to inform all your customers about the issue, but you want to do it in the right way. But I think that the thing that I applaud you for, and I think what we have to continue to do, and I think is an important part of governance, is you do have to be very transparent and very open. And really do your best to communicate in an open and authentic way what happened. And you don't want to do it in the wrong way, and you must take your time. And I think that's something that we're starting to see, not just in Silicon Valley, but with these very fast-growing companies. And I think that's something we have to really continue to do, because there is a trust thing here, to your point. It's not just enough to say, wow, it's so fast, even the smartest people in the world don't know what's going on. And so I think, as you talked about, Fadi, this notion of, there's a lot of self-governance, but that's a practice we have to really attest to, not just because it's important for your customers you serve, but I think if we want to keep this advancing forward, this notion of trust and transparency has to continue to be built.
And so I'll get you started on the second part of the question, Magnus.
Yeah.
And so you are also in a business that launched without the law allowing you to launch. In general, you launched in a gray area. So there was no regulation, but you launched and you asked for forgiveness, and then you pulled the regulator and told him, please regulate me, because I want to be in business here and I am adding value in the market. Thank you very much. So, take it from there. And then you did it, and you're influencing hundreds of thousands of people. So there is a positive element to your entrepreneurial endeavor.
Yeah. So I think when we launched Careem about 6 years ago in Dubai, the UAE was actually one of the leading countries in the region to have a regulation. And there was a regulation when we launched for limousine cars, which we abided by. And then the kingdom, Saudi Arabia, has been also very on the leading edge, and we're very quick to globally, on a global scene, Saudi Arabia was actually one of the first countries that created a specific regulation for ride-hailing companies. So this has happened as well. Conversations are ongoing in Egypt. Conversations are ongoing in Jordan.
And then you got shut down in Jordan for no good reason.
Exactly. So we're working with the government in Jordan to help shape a regulation that will be powerful both for the citizens and for the sort of environment for entrepreneurship and startups. But maybe I want to come back to a point where Will started us off. I think it's abundantly clear for everyone that technology is the future. Clear. Now, how are you going to play in that space? It's all about talent. It's not even about capital. We have a lot of capital in the region, but it's not about capital. It's about talent. And how do you get that talent to come here and make things happen? And how do you go from being consumers of technology to being producers of technology? And here I think it's very, very fascinating, because I think that the way to make this happen starts in the homes, and it goes all the way to what governments can do. And if you look what some of the governments are doing in the region, start with Saudi Arabia, we're here, Vision 2030, super visionary about setting, this is the direction of where we want to go, and we want technology to be at the core of it. Look at the UAE, where Sheikh Mohammed in Dubai said, I want to have 25% of the vehicles in this city should be driverless. Make it happen. Or they started the initiative to create 1 million Arab coders. No other country, no other region in the world have had these type of bold initiatives coming out on a government level. So that's at one level. But we also need to care about technology in the homes and in our families. And this is a bit linked to what some of the initiatives you mentioned. I have an 8-year-old daughter. She wants to hang out on her computer and on her iPad all the time. And I tell her, if you want to watch YouTube, okay, you have half an hour. If you want to write stories, if you want to try to learn how to code, if you want to build stuff, spend as much time as you want. We have to get people into the mindset of building stuff. And when we go back to what Tony was saying about every company needs to have a strong mission, the mission of Kareem, the purpose of Kareem, the reason we exist is, on the one hand, we want to simplify and improve the lives of people in the region. We want to create jobs for our captains. We have created 500,000 jobs in the region. We want to empower people to move around, not the least women, because when you can move around, you can become an active part of society. You can much easier take a job. You can go around and do what you want to do. So that's one part of our mission, simplifying and improving lives of people. But the other part of our mission, which is equally important, is that we want to build an awesome organization that inspires. We haven't had any Googles, we haven't had any Twitters, we haven't had any Facebook being built from the region. How is our youth going to go out and even start trying to build?
But we have a Kareem.
Yeah, we have a Kareem, but we are one. We have to take Kareem all the way. We have to go public. We have to make it super successful. We have to have a lot of people that leave Kareem, a bit like the PayPal mafia or the Facebook mafia, people that were part of Kareem from the early days. They should go out. They should hopefully have made a little bit of money. They should start the next level of companies. This is what's going to help bring the region into the future that Will was, I think, very eloquently describing. So that's one part, and I feel very passionate about this. Another part is around governance when it comes to technology. And I think Abdulrahman was talking about you need to strike the right balance, and Tony was talking about it as well. At Kareem, why are we winning in the region? Why are we outcompeting a global giant from Silicon Valley? I believe that we are winning because we are super local. We know that the way we win in Riyadh is very different than how we win in Karachi or how we win in Cairo. We talk about the region, but it's not the region. It's a bunch of countries and cities, and every city has its own dynamics. So how do you win? You need to empower the local teams to be able to innovate locally. So you have to have local innovation, and you need to move fast. That doesn't sound like comforting from a governance perspective. Decentralize and let people run fast. But you have to do that if you want to be able to compete in this world of technology. But at the same time, there are some aspects that you need to make sure that you put stronger governance, like data, information, security. So I think the whole notion of governance in a technology world, my summary would be you have to figure out the areas where you are really protecting something, and I think data is at the core of that. There you need to have very strong governance and very strong controls. And I think the government will play a role in that space as well to protect its citizens and residents. But at the same time, you cannot stifle innovation and technology, so you need to empower, decentralize, and allow for this innovation to happen. So whether it is in the internal teams in Kareem, in our management team, whether I look at how we govern with our board, or whether how I look at how we work with the governments, it is this sort of balance of things are moving really fast. You need to allow for speed. You need to allow for decentralized decision-making, while at the same time figuring out the few things that you cannot compromise.
Thank you. I have many questions, but I think I'd like to open it up for the public here to ask questions. First question here, we have the microphones here. Be careful. Thank you. Please mention your name so that they know who you are, and tell us who you're asking the question to.
My name is Fahim Al-Qasimi from a firm called AQMP. Forgive me, Magnus, I promise I wouldn't ask. But let's look at the positive elements. Until the regulation catches up, what would you tell young startups today to change in their corporate governance to protect themselves more from things like data breaches? What corporate governance lessons have we learned from your experience?
I think the topic of data security is critical whether you are a small startup or whether you are a Facebook, right? And you're actually facing the same type of adversaries, whether you are a Facebook or whether you are a small startup. So I think one of the things we have learned over the last 3 months when we have been collaborating with cybersecurity firms, with law enforcement agencies, is that everyone is in the same boat. So there's a lot of collaboration and partnership that is happening. We are now exchanging information with many large companies in the region and globally about, we've seen this threat, we see this actor is doing this. And I think that you can participate in, those type of collaborations, you can participate in even as an early small startup. So I think that's one. And then secondly, again, this maybe becomes a bit more techy, but if you're a small startup and you're building technology, there's a lot of technological tools these days that are freely available, open source, that are part of a platform. Don't build everything yourself so that you can get security built in from your products from the beginning. I think this is probably 2 advice I would have for startups.
It helps if it's on, I think. My name is Hassan Jarrar. I'm the CEO of Bahrain Islamic Bank. Question for Will. You mentioned after-school programs, and I sort of want to marry that to what Magnus said about teaching young kids coding and so on. Can you tell us what you do for your after-school programs back in the States?
I started off just telling the kids the truth about the configuration and how their poverty and their in and out of juvenile hall and correctional facilities is a business. And them going to jail, someone profits from that. And the bad food in the neighborhood, that will then get them sick. And then a doctor will prescribe them medicine, is also a business. And if you want to have resolution, then you need to educate yourself and compete business to business. And the way to do that is have knowledge of your community, the configuration of it, how your poverty level is just really fuel for this disgusting industry in America. And how here are some skill sets that can not only, put you on a trajectory to fill these jobs that are not filled, but now you have the ability to create jobs. And here's some mentors from Boeing, Lockheed & Martin, NASA to come. So I'm a magnet. I like to go around and meet different disciplines, whether it's for my philanthropic or my entrepreneurial activities. And so we have folks from Boeing that mentor our kids, people from NASA that mentor our kids, Lockheed & Martin that mentor our kids. And then I'll go around and find new tools like GIS, Global Information Systems, where our kids are building maps. Our kids are writing code with code.org. They're building robots with First Robotics, all while transforming their grades with a program called College Track that Lorraine Powell Jobs created, and I sit on that board as well. So, but if I didn't tell the kids the truth, that ugly truth, then they wouldn't have signed up for the program. But it's that truth. Hey, here's the situation, and here's how messed up it is, but don't get mad. Here's some inspiration and some skill sets. And we've seen change like we've never seen before, to the point where Lorraine Powell Jobs has taken our program, the combination of, a college preparation coupled with robotics, coupled with computer science, GIS mapping, And now we're duplicating that across the states. And talent, to Magnus's point, whether you're importing talent or developing talent in your country, you kind of need to do both. I remember traveling to Bangalore, India in 2005 to do a concert, and the Bangalore, India that was then is not the Bangalore, India that is now. And if you're Google, Facebook, Twitter, some of your best engineers have came from Bangalore, India. Now we have offices in Bangalore, India for our AI company. That's where all of our natural language understanding, natural language processing is being done at. And those guys that were in the slums, that's a Silicon Valley of Asia, are mentoring my kids in the ghetto that I'm from as well. So it's that secular, collaborative, cross-discipline mentorship that's happening with philanthropy, entrepreneurial activity, and pushing forward with one purpose, and that purpose is to allow people to talk to machines alongside educating folks to be just as smart as machines.
I'm told no more questions, but I hope your question is very short. At least it requires a short answer.
Okay.
Last minute, please. So even you guys, just give us 1 minute because I promised. So thank you. There you go.
Okay. This is Omar Al-Sunaid, Assistant Professor of Law and Governance. My question to Mr. Magnus is about, okay, we have heard many cases that of breaching data and security. Why not Kareem protect such risk from that side? Why Kareem wait until that happened and then after that starting building something for this problem?
So Magnus, I'm going to give you a minute, and then if he wants a more detailed answer, you can see him right after.
So the 1 minute answer, good question. The 1 minute answer is we have been working with security from day one, so for 5.5 years. And it's a constant work, constant strengthening of system, constant strengthening of processes. So this has been there from the beginning. What started when we were informed about this incident was a more deep forensic exercise, but obviously the work with security has always been there. And again, why did it take us 3 months to disclose this information? If you look at global best practices, this is still very fast. Many companies take up to a year to disclose. Our priority was from the beginning to be able to tell everyone as soon as possible that we could be sure that we would not jeopardize the investigation and that we would be able to protect the information from other potential cyber criminals that would be notified from the disclosure. So it was always with the best of the captains and the best of the customers in mind.
Thank you. So, Will, it's an honor to have moderated your first panel in Saudi Arabia. Welcome to town. Magnus, Abdulrahman, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our panel and our moderator. If I may, I please ask you to remain on stage, and please ask Mr. Amin al-Nasser and Mr. Badr Jafar to present token of appreciation to the panels.